When I look back at the journey from Virginia Tech, where I came for my master's, I lost my scholarship. I'm like, I'm not going back to that. I'm just going to sell books door to door. So that then led me on to my first entrepreneurial job, and then I ultimately started Octane.
How does a man go from selling books door to door to selling his company for $3.2 billion? Today, I sit down with someone who did just that. Tim Guleri started with hustle, an engineering degree, a master's in robotics, and a side gig selling books to fund school.
When I started Octane in 96, shift in the market was the internet was happening. And I was confident that the internet's going to once again change the customer interaction sort of landscape. That was my insight as an entrepreneur. And that's how I built the company.
In the 90s, he helped build Scopus Technology, sold for $750 million before founding Octane Software. Now, as managing director at Sierra Ventures, he's backed billion-dollar exits like SourceFire, Shape Security, and Treasure Data. This is the Tim Guleri story.
Nothing great gets built overnight. You have to have the courage as an entrepreneur to realize that and lean into that commitment. And then we will be your thought partners and capital partners to kind of take us to that journey. I have a pretty deeply ingrained view on what a great venture partner is early stage of the company, which is giving you the gift of time.
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network, but HubSpot doesn't just have great podcasts. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're a builder, they've got your back. Now, why is that important? Because if you're building anything, you know that marketing in 2025 is absolutely wild. Now, why is that important? Because you know if you're an entrepreneur, if you're building anything, marketing in 2025 is wild. Savvy customers spot fake messaging instantly. Anything AI generated, they sniff it out. Privacy changes make ad targeting a nightmare, and everyone needs more content now than ever. And that's why you have to have HubSpot's new marketing trends report. It doesn't just show you what's changing, it shows you exactly how to deal with it. Everything's backed by research, but focused on marketing plays that you can use for your business tomorrow. If you're ready to turn marketing hurdles into results for your business, go to hubspot.com/marketing to download it for free. A huge shout out to Lingoda for supporting today's episode. Now, if you're ready to master a new language, Lingoda is the online language platform trusted by over 100,000 students worldwide. Lingoda offers live classes with real teachers available 24/7. You can choose from German, English, Business English, French, Spanish, or their newest edition, Italian. What sets Lingoda apart? The smallest class size in the market. It's just you and up to 5 other students. Or if you want, you can go one-on-one for personalized attention. Their native level teachers don't just teach language, they share culture too, and you'll speak confidently from day one. With Lingoda's flexible scheduling and proven curriculum, students report being able to navigate real conversations in weeks, not years. And if you're using Lingoda for business, their CEFR aligned courses ensure that you're learning internationally recognized language standards that employers value. Between sessions, you're going to reinforce your skills with downloadable materials and bite-sized practice exercises. And all Success Story listeners, they put together a special deal. Try Lingoda free with 3 group classes or 1 private class. Plus, you save on any course with my link try.lingoda.com/successstory and code SCOTT25. Don't miss this chance to transform your life through language learning. Today's episode is brought to you by Vanta. Now, listen up. This matters for your business. In today's digital landscape, security isn't optional, it's essential. Without it, deals stall, sales cycles stretch on, and scaling becomes very difficult. Now, why? Because investors, customers, and partners all expect businesses to demonstrate strong security practices before they commit. If you can't prove trust, you lose opportunities. So whether you're a startup founder trying to land that first big client or an established company scaling your security program, Vanta helps businesses of all sizes prove that they're trustworthy by automating compliance across 35 frameworks like SOC 2, ISO 27001, and HIPAA, the exact certifications your prospects are demanding. Here's why you need to pay attention. Vanta gives you back precious time that you're currently wasting on compliance. Their platform automates up to 90% of the tedious compliance work. It helps you respond to those endless security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and it connects you with experts to get your security program running immediately. The results speak for themselves. A recent IDC report found that Vanta customers achieve over $535,000 per year in benefits, and the platform pays for itself in just 3 months. So you're going to join over 10,000 global companies like Atlassian, Cora, and Factory who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. And don't miss this. For a limited time only, my listeners can get $1,000 off Vanta. That's real money back in your pocket. Visit vanta.com/Scott right now before this offer expires. That is VANTA.com/Scott.
Tim, you've gone from selling books door to door to putting yourself through grad school to building billion-dollar companies. So talk to me about a common thread in your journey.
I think, Scott, the common thread I would say is that, you when you're growing up as a child or whatever, you have certain, sets of trainings that your parents impart on you, and that tends to shape you as an individual. And for me, when I look back, because I've reflected on this many times, I think there were two things. One I got from my dad, the other from my mom. So my mom was an avid gardener, and she loved literally she had a patch of dirt that she'd given me, and that was my patch of dirt, and I was responsible for it. Get my hands dirty, make sure I kind of water the plants, all that good stuff. So the idea that you're constantly working if you love something, and then it doesn't feel like work, right? And the idea that you're constantly pushing the ball forward, right, is one key anchoring attribute I guess I have. And the other one is my dad was in the Indian Army when I was growing up. He always and then he was the infantry, so life was pretty hard, and he always had this term called bokshan, which is when you're boxing and you fall on the ground, the referee says, once he counts you down, he goes, box on. Okay, you get up and you keep going again, right? So point being that obviously you have to be smart at your skill set and, technical or otherwise. But once you kind of have some liftoff, you got to go back to your kind of core, features as an individual, what makes you you, right? So when I look back at the journey from Virginia Tech, where I came for my master's, and then, one summer I lost my sponsorship, scholarship. And so instead of calling dad for money, I'm like, I'm not going back to dad. I'm just going to sell books door to door and earn, 10, 12 grand and pay my tuition for the next quarter, which is the door to door selling that I did in Sacramento, California. But it was one of those things where you fall down, adversity happens, but you just kind of pick yourself up and keep going, right? And so that then, led me on to my first entrepreneurial job. And then I ultimately started Octane, which is the company you're referring to, which had a great outcome.
So when you think about entrepreneurship and I think that you discovered when you started selling books, maybe it was earlier than that you had this entrepreneurial mindset. And I've always gone back and forth on this idea, and different people have different opinions. Like, can entrepreneurship be learned? Is it something that you're born with? Is it something that you learn? What do you feel? Do you feel like it was something that you've always been, or was it something that you had to work for?
No, I think I'm on the camp where it can absolutely be learned. So if you look at my history, I didn't come from a business family. I came from an army family where dad got fixed income, right? And he went from, worked from like a very regimented, like 8:30 in the morning back at, 4 p.m. and then off to, his evening activities. So growing up, I had no business, being talked on the table, none of that, right? But I think going back to the what made me, interestingly, which was kind of like this always on and so on and so forth. When I came to California, and I used to go to my friend's house on the weekend, and the normal conversation around the water cooler was always around entrepreneur X, company Y, and that guy do great. So like the fact that, and that's really, I think, something that is amazing, Scott, about America, which is the can-do is in the water, right? And it is, I think, for the individual that really wants to be that person, for them to grab that. So when I was here in the early 90s, kind of, doing my first entrepreneurial job, and those were the conversations around the water cooler or with my friends on the weekend, I was like, I look back at my own skill set, I'm like, I can do this. I can be that guy, right, that they're talking about in the third person. And that sort of just changed me and made me this got the fire going inside of me, man. Remember, I was kind of in my 20s at the time, right? So this is not somebody that's 17 or 18. So I'm like already through grad school and doing my first job. So I think the long answer to your short question is I think entrepreneurship is something that could be absolutely learned, and the fire can get lit at any time in your career. And it just comes down to, if that spark happens, you got to lean into it.
How do you know what to lean into? Because you built, you built two companies, so Scopus and Octane. Octane was the $3.2 billion exit. That's massive number, right? So obviously you leaned into something that was working. But for an entrepreneur, I think that's the biggest difficulty. There's a lot of difficulties when you're an entrepreneur, but one of the biggest difficulties is there's two competing thoughts, right? So should I keep investing into this? It's always going to take longer than I expect. I know that, maybe it's not going to be at the 2 or 3 year mark, but the 7, 8, 9, 10 year mark, I'm going to start to see that bell curve, growth curve, hockey stick growth curve, everything up and to the right that I was hoping for. Or on the flip side, I'm putting all my time and energy into something that I can't really validate product market fit. I'm not seeing the traction. Maybe I should just, as Kevin O'Leary says, take it out behind the barn and shoot it. So when you're trying to invest your life and energy into something, how do you validate if it's an idea that you actually want to commit yourself to?
I think there are two ways to think about it. I'll tell you my journey, and not every entrepreneur's journey is that way. I was lucky to be early at Scopus. I was like employee number 7, and this was a company that was in the customer relationship management space. So I call it the granddaddy of Salesforce.com, right? Like the first OGs in the space, Scopus, Vantive, and Clarify. And that was my live MBA. So in other words, I joined in sales engineering. I rose up to the ranks in sales engineering, which is where you learn all about selling and kind of, what do the customer want and remember, I was an engineer coming into the job. So I had zero knowledge about sales, or, you didn't even know what a quota was or what these sales guys do for a living. And then I was lucky that my CEO, Orisa-san, and my now very close friend, Aaron Ahmed, who ran sales, gave me an opportunity to move from there into marketing. And so, I call it the live MBA because I'm in this company that is growing. I'm getting cross-functional training. And that sort of gave me, along with my other comment earlier about just being very naturally inclined because of those conversations, that I got to do something entrepreneurial. It gave me the skill set and the confidence that, hey, I can do this, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that if you can set yourself up as a young person in a company where you can learn those skills on somebody else's dime, that actually sets you up really well, that when you're doing your own company, you don't make the mistakes. And the beauty about startups is that, I race cars now for entertainment, and sort of, when your ass is 2 inches from the ground, you feel every bump, right? And that's different than, being at a larger company like a Snowflake or Salesforce.com, where you might be just in a single department. So what I tell entrepreneurs or wannabe entrepreneurs is get into a well-run small company, because that's the easiest and the fastest way to get cross-functional skills. And I think that's what's going to set you up when you do your own company to really, execute and then make the most of it. So, and the second part of that is that also gives you kind of these filters that says that when you're doing your own company, hey, this is not working. And hey, should I go and shoot this idea behind the barn and try the next thing? It also gives you contacts, right? Like I was able to hire the handful of first engineers at Octane because of my tenure at Scopus. So my co-founder, Kira Makagon, who is now the president of Ring Central, a very successful public company, came from that because she and I, got to know each other, and we said, okay, we're going to do Octane together, right? So you get venture capital contacts because I was presenting to the board when I was at Scopus. You get co-worker contacts like Kira. you get customer contacts. So first 3 contracts actually came from customers that had churned from Scopus. And I just went to the same guys and said, hey, I've just hung the shingle. I'm the guy. Will you, we did great business before. Will you give me a chance? Right? So there's all this benefits of working in a really well-run startup company before you do your own.
So it just, I mean, when you do this, you massively de-risk building a company.
Yeah.
Because you see it because of all the entrepreneurs that come to you and probably pitch to you. But do you feel like there's an incorrect shift in the I mean, I don't think it's new, but an incorrect shift in the definition of entrepreneurship where people are like forgoing any work experience and just trying to build either right out of school to emulate like a Zuckerberg, I want to build the next thing, I'm going to drop out of Stanford, I'm going to go build a company, or even people that don't want to build a tech company. I feel like social media, it propagates this idea of it's so easy to build, it's so easy to, be an entrepreneur, and you see it, you're front line to this. Do you see a lot of people sort of forgoing the delayed gratification and trying to get this instant entrepreneur result and then backfiring on the back of that because they haven't put in the reps and the work?
Yeah. So I think firstly, look, I think it's super commendable whether you're right out of school and you jump into, solo entrepreneurship because that's the fashionable thing to do and all your friends are doing it. Or you go the journey that I was describing that I went, where I worked at another company for 5-6 years. And then I started my second, my company, which I started, right, which was Octane. But in both cases, kudos to you because you're an entrepreneur, right? So let's start with that, right? Because it takes a special person to, be that, okay? And there's learning in both paths. I do feel that that on the first path, where you're just kind of launching yourself, and a handful of kids in a dorm or whatever, I think the probability of success is much lower, right? Because you just don't know what you don't know, and so a lot of these, and we see this, with Y Combinator and other, incubators where, the team that came through the YC batch X plus 2, X plus 3, they come back and that's the real company. So I mean, if you look at the YC sort of, alumni book, they talk about Airbnb and they talk about all these like high flyers, but there is 98% of these classes actually just train you to be an entrepreneur, but you're learning. That's kind of the Scopus example I was giving you. And then you come back next time around, ready for knowing what mistakes you made and then so on and so forth. So I think, to me, if you were planning it out, and you're like a new, grad and you were trying to like go, hey, I'm entrepreneurial. I think going down the path where you put yourself in a entrepreneurial school while you're building the idea, puts you at the in a much higher category of success. And even then, it's not easy, but at least you break the risk down, and you have some skill set to to push yourself forward with.
And when you sort of walk through, because obviously your journey shaped how you approach investing and how you approach entrepreneurs. So your experience, how did it shape your investment thesis? How did it shape what you look for in entrepreneurs?
So I think the first thing is that entrepreneurs that I like are the ones that they have an insight about the future that is not consensus. So, there's this classic kind of, categorization, which I'm sure you've heard of, which is contrarian investing, non-consensus investing, and, consensus or beta investing, right? And contrarian investing, as the name suggests, is where you get the most alpha but the most risk. So this is like, you're looking so far ahead and you're taking a complete flyer, right?
Yeah.
Consensus is where you're just following the market, and in the middle is non-consensus investing, which is the one that I like because this is when you're seeing the world through the eyes of the founder. So what I try to do is hang out with these founders that come through us and try to connect the dots and what is it that this team or this founder is seeing that the rest of the market is not seeing that I believe in. Because remember, we're doing early stage, right? We are trying to be like the first institutional check into these entrepreneurs that want to build real companies in the B2B market. So that's the Sierra Ventures is ICP. So I look for that in these founders, and that comes from my own, journey as an entrepreneur. Because when I started Octane in '96, CRM had happened, and there was Scopus and Siebel Systems and these big companies. But the shift in the market was the internet was happening. And I was confident that the internet's going to once again change the customer interaction sort of landscape. And that was my insight as an entrepreneur. And that is what, my investors, Greylock and Sigma, backed. And that's how I built the company. So I look for the same pattern match now when I'm meeting the founders. And then my job is to agree with them that this is the road that you need to execute on to de-risk that idea such that you can get the first handful of customers and the next handful of phenomenal investors to put fuel in the tank. So that
I even think, oh, sorry, I apologize. No, I was just going to say, even your journey from operator to investor, I think is a little bit interesting. And I would say not common because, okay, so I have to understand this. You can sort of walk me through this story. I think it's fascinating. So you had a $3.2 billion exit. That was Sierra was the entity that acquired Octane, but then there was...
No. Octane was acquired by E.piphany, which was
okay.
me. And
I understand now.
Then I hung out at E.piphany, integrating Octane into E.piphany, but the then CEO and a dear friend of mine, Roger Saboni. And then while I was at E.piphany as one of the officers, I met Peter Bendel, who was the founder of Sierra, and one of my good friends from Scopus, Dave Schwab, was also a partner at Sierra. So that was a connection.
A big thank you to Indeed for supporting Success Story, because hiring people is one of the hardest things you're ever going to have to do as an entrepreneur, as a founder, as somebody who's trying to build a business. It's important to hire well and find the right person, but it takes so much time and it's so labor intensive because, like most entrepreneurs, you have 1,000 things going on, and there's a good chance that you just realized your business needed to hire somebody yesterday. So how can you find that great, amazing, right fit candidate fast? It's easy. Just use Indeed, because you don't have to waste time struggling to get your job posts seen on all these other job sites. If you're using Indeed, you can just use their sponsored jobs to help you stand out and hire fast. Your post jumps right to the top of the page for relevant candidates, so you can reach out to exactly who you're looking for faster, and the results really speak for themselves. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. And you know what I love most about Indeed? It really just makes hiring so fast, because everything is streamlined in one place. No more juggling multiple platforms or waiting weeks for the right candidate. And how fast is Indeed? In the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. There's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed, and listeners of Success Story will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/Clary. Terms and conditions do apply. Just go to Indeed.com/Clary. A huge thank you to NetSuite for supporting today's episode. Now, what does the future hold for business? If you ask 9 experts, you're going to get 10 answers. Bull market, bear market, inflation up, inflation down. Honestly, at this point, you just need a crystal ball. But until we get one, over 41,000 businesses have found the next best thing. They future-proofed their businesses, their operations with NetSuite by Oracle, which is the #1 cloud ERP. Imagine having your accounting, your financial management, your inventory, your HR, all flowing together in one fluid platform. And here's what makes NetSuite different. It gives you one source of truth for your business. You get the visibility and control to make quick, confident decisions while others are guessing. You're working with real-time data, insights, forecasting. You're basically looking into the future of your business with actionable data, whether your company earns a couple million or even hundreds of millions. NetSuite helps you respond to immediate challenges and helps you grab your biggest opportunities. And speaking of opportunities, they put together the CFO's Guide to AI and Machine Learning at netsuite.com/Scott Clary. This is the playbook for understanding how to use AI for your business. The guide is free. That is netsuite.com/Scott Clary. I was trying to figure out how you ended up running Sierra. I was trying to figure out the through line. Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
So the slide is interesting. So I obviously knew venture capital because I'd raised money from some of, I think, the best firms in the Valley as an entrepreneur. And so I knew the venture capital game. I returned for them $500 million each, from the Octane experience. So, at least like $500 million reasons for each of them to make, still be dear friends. And now we co-invest together. But then I'd never quite formally thought about becoming a VC. I was kind of on my second company, and I was like, yeah, I'll do a third or a fourth or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I happened to spend time with Peter and Dave, and Sierra felt like a startup at that time. The firm had been around already for 20 years, but the way they were thinking about and helping early stage founders, that was what my love was. So I spent a little bit of time on board meetings with Peter and Dave, and that's when I pulled the trigger and joined Sierra in 2002.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense. I was wondering. I was like, I don't think Sierra had the capital to make that kind of acquisition. No. But then I was thinking it was some sort of private equity place. Okay, so Octane was acquired by Pubco, and then this was just relationships that led you into Sierra. Okay. How has Sierra changed? I mean, over time, what was their thesis and what was their strategy when you first started talking to Peter? What has changed over time? What's evolved?
Yeah, I think Sierra is a phenomenal brand. Very well, has served like some of the largest companies. Stratacom, which became the core of Cisco, was our investment. You look at the beginnings of ERP. So Intuit was one of a signature investment that actually Peter Wendell made himself, and so on and so forth. So lots and lots of history before I joined the firm. But in 2001, 2002, you recall that this was like right after the craziness of the internet wave and the crash, right, of the market, right, in the early 2000s. And so what the firm had become, the fund had become very large, and we were doing early stage and late stage. And it became clear when you roll the clock forward kind of to 2010, 2011, that strategy was not something that I was excited by as one of the general partners, and my two other partners, Mark Fernandez and Ben Yu. Well, we wanted to do early stage, and we felt that sort of a split strategy would serve neither masters, right? Doing a good job in early stage investing or mid stage investing. So that's kind of when we discussed with the rest of the partnership and took the firm down the direction of early stage investing. So in 2012, Scott, I would say, was the birth of what I jokingly call Sierra 2.0. So we reinvented ourselves in the sense that we got clarity on mission, right? The brand had been around. The firm now is over 40 years in business, investing our 13th fund. So one of the iconic names in B2B tech investing, and really lucky to be given that pedestal by our limited partners and entrepreneurs that choose to work with us. But what really made it clear and fun, and starting in 2012. When we effectively took over the management of the entire firm, because I was an individual general partner before then, and then 2012 onwards running the firm along with my partner Mark and Ben, is now we had a very, very clear North Star, which is you want to be the first institutional check-in, be first or second sometimes, because now these are pre-seeds and all kinds of fun stuff happens before we find a great investment. And then
fun stuff's in air quotes. So.
Yeah, exactly. Friends and family rounds and pre-seats and all kinds of stuff, right? But sort of the come early, stay late mentality, right? That nothing great gets built overnight, okay? And you have to have the courage as an entrepreneur to realize that and lean into that commitment. And then we will be your thought partners and capital partners to kind of take you through that journey. And I think what really helps is that, I've personally been on the road multiple times, taken several companies public. We've kind of have all the arrows in our back. So it's like, hey, I really suggest you don't walk down that alley because it's gonna hurt, right? Because we've been there. And I think it's that authenticity of brand and love for entrepreneurs and everything they go through and deep respect is what I think, Sierra has come to become. And then obviously we do a lot of other stuff of, we have all CIO advisory board and all kinds of infrastructure to help these guys get the first 10, 15, 20 customers. But that's a little, I think, the backstory. Yeah.
I know I love it. And I think that, again, if you've played this game before and you've built companies multiple times, then this may not be a surprise. But for a first-time founder, maybe just describe the importance of, I love this philosophy, come early, stay late. I think that's an incredible philosophy. And I want to sort of reinforce how important that is as a first-time founder, what that's going to mean to you in your journey, and just having somebody who's really in it for the long haul. So maybe talk about the importance of that, but also I think it is important, without naming names because that's not cool, but talk about some of the traps that founders can fall into when they work with other types of firms.
Yeah, I think, I think it's ultimately founders have to be very thoughtful about the kind of journey they're going to embark on, right? So are you sprinting and you're building muscle memory to be a sprinter or a marathon runner, right? Because, the way you train, the way you eat, your regimen is very different, right? So if you're trying to be, Instagram and kind of trying to get to $1 billion outcome and, you get bought by Meta, that's a, consumer company, different looking, that's like, what I think the industry starts to call blitzscaling, which is like just pour a bunch of gas and, good stuff happens. We don't believe in that philosophy of incinerating cash. We like to build solid foundations so that you can build the tallest building in downtown, right? Like it just takes, very, very thoughtful, methodical execution, understanding also that along the way, there'll be a lot of like discovery and your decisions that have to be made that might be painful, for the entrepreneur because you're letting people go or you're, moving strategies. But again, somebody that has been there, done that, has a steady hand on the till, and, really work entrepreneur hours. I mean, you should talk to some of the entrepreneurs that I'm involved with, Mark, my partner, Ben, Shashank, etc. I mean, last night I was on a phone call till like 10:30, right, with some guy. And we're texting, right? And the guy's like, hey, Tim, you're awake? I just finished dinner. I'm watching, the game yesterday, the playoffs. And bang, he just calls me. We have a quick, like, half-an-hour conversation. And it doesn't feel like work to me. Because honestly, I don't think I've ever worked since 2001. Honestly, Scott. Like, and I, don't tell my partners this. I shouldn't get paid $1 for doing this, right? I have so much fun. Because, I love these entrepreneurs. I love what they're building. And we're invested in it. Not just writing the check is the easy part. Can you give them the time? That's the hard part. So I'll answer your question, which is when you're choosing a VC partner, don't worry about the cash as much as worry about the time. Are they going to give you the time and really be there, be a thought partner as you're navigating these halls and alleys I was talking about before? And I think if they cannot give you the time, which is what happens when you're multi-stage and multi-billion-dollar fund, because look, you cannot possibly have time because you have 300 people in your organization, you have $7 billion to invest, you're writing like $150 million checks a piece. That's a different beast, right? And those GPs also make great money for the investors, but that is not the game that we play, and I don't think that's a game that early stage entrepreneurs should be looking to play. So I have a pretty, like deeply ingrained view on what a great venture partner is at this stage, early stage of a company, which is giving you the gift of time. And you can only do that if you're making these concentrated bets, right? Like I write like one check, maybe 1.5 check a year. And so do my partner. So we're not spray and pray. We're not like doing, 70 companies. It's a very conviction-based investment strategy. I think that's paying us very well, and LPs and funds are doing great because of that.
I think it's smart, and I think it's a healthier strategy for the entrepreneur, because the spray and pray, blitz scaling, it's okay if 9 companies fail, at least one will be a unicorn. I think these are very toxic ideas, and I don't love these ideas. And sometimes entrepreneurs just see money and they get excited and they jump at the money, and they don't realize that, like, listen, your life is not going to be as great as you think it is just because you take some money from an investor. So I think it's important. I love that you're so focused and you're so careful and thoughtful with your checks, because that means that. And another idea, like, money is relatively cheap, but time is very expensive.
Very expensive.
So to get time from a managing partner I don't think that happens that often.
Yep.
I really don't. I mean, what your risk is that you make the wrong bets. So maybe just talk about how you make sure that 1.5 checks that you write per year is not betting on the wrong company or the wrong person.
I think that's a great question. And the interesting thing about venture is, Scott, and the reason I love this job that I do is that you cannot rest on your laurels, because the market and the technology trends keep changing. So you always have to keep repotting yourself. So 20 years doing this, I can still tell you that I'm still learning. And I still have that, that learner's mindset personally, and that, because it's just like, and I learn a lot from entrepreneurs. They teach me a lot, and I'm constantly looking for that, right? Constantly spending time. Like today, I have lunch with the chief digital officer of GSK. We're going to spend an hour together, and she sits on top of a massive budget. So, both on the industry side, entrepreneur side, and then senior execs, right? Like, so we're constantly learning. I think for me, what I think is super important is that these learnings are the stuff that you transfer over to these entrepreneurs, so that the transfer learning on the osmosis is happening, and they're just like figuring this out and not again going in wrong directions, or making the most efficient use of the capital that you've given them, right? And so we do 6 optimizations in the seed through Series A journey. And the 6 optimizations are, there's product marketing or product positioning optimization. There's team optimization. So how do you structure your team? There is company positioning optimization. So the whole series of exercises we take the entrepreneur through, like, okay, what is the category? What should you really call it, right? There's a financial model optimization. There's a whole series of exercises there. There's a cap table optimization, which is like, okay, cap table is very much like cash. There's only so much of it to go around. So there's a whole notion of, okay, how should we think through C to A to B to C? Because ultimately we're on the same comp plan as the founders. We're working for equity and equity value, right? And the final is, funding or fundraising optimization. So these are the sub-pillars, if you may, of building a great foundation of a startup company. And that's what we spend time on, and I think that's what makes great companies happen. The mistakes are when, and we make it, and I make them personally as well, where, and most of these have to do with the individual CEO that we took a bet on, and that bet ended up being wrong. So a read of the CEO, or the read on the CEO, or on the market, right, was not like on the nose. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So in one instance, it was a seed check. It was a company that was based in the Rockies, and it was a very, very aggressive and a very fundamentally disruptive idea. So we seeded this company along with another small seed fund. I think they raised maybe $3.5 million or so. And then the year into it, the CEO was not seeing the North Star be the North Star. So the market had shifted quickly. OpenAI had done something different than what we expected them to do. And suddenly that market idea disappeared. And the CEO just, called me one day and said, hey, I'm going to do something else, right? So that's an example of two things going wrong in that opportunity. One is the CEO's resolve to work through a knot, right? I didn't read it correctly. I thought that particular gentleman, individual, would actually go through that wall, but he chose not to. And the second is we didn't expect the market to shift. So no harm, no foul. I'm still, very friendly with that CEO. But that's what seed bets are all about. You make the best sort of bet based on the information you have at hand at that particular point. And you truly understand what you have once you're 6-9 months into the journey with the entrepreneur.
In a situation like that, is there something that you could do to, or that you try and do to help the founder CEO align on the same vision, like realign? Because from every person that I've spoken to who does venture investing, the individual is the most important component. Like, yes, the market can shift, but the individual is the X factor. Like, if that person goes rogue, you're done. So what are the, let's talk to investors in the audience. Say they put money into an early stage company. What can you do in that case? Is there strategy? Is there tactic? Or is that write off?
Yeah, I think so. The first thing is that do as much work as you possibly can before you write the check. And I really mean this with this is why I'm not a fan of, these party rounds that happen over the weekend and everybody's writing a $300K check and then nobody shows up for work, right? So, because there's no ownership to the project, right?
Yeah.
The founders raised, $4 million, but everybody's put in $200K. Like, okay. And then there's no, nobody to challenge your ideas or give you new ones. And it's a very lonely place to be. So if I was advising, entrepreneurs, I would say, don't do that, right? Investors, which is a question you asked, I think I now have a much more rigorous process on understanding the individual behind the CEO, right? Like, what is this person all about? And doing blind references and other calls. Now, one of the benefits we have as a 40-year plus venture capital firm is we're one call away for almost any entrepreneur to find out, what are they all about? Because, we've got such a massive network, right? So unless you're a UFO, one of these kids from college that doesn't have a history in the Valley, if you've done 5, 7, 10 years of work in the Valley, we know one person that, will give you. Yeah. So I do a lot of work in advance. I also spend a lot of time with them, sort of off cycle, taking them out for dinner, go for a walk before we write the check. This is really to unpack the person behind the person. But I think having said all that, things can still go wrong because people are people. And so the answer to that is for the listeners that are investors is surround them with a highly skilled set of either co-founders or advisors early on. And I think because CEOs tend to learn by osmosis, the best of them. They have a learning mindset. And a great example of this is one of my favorite CEOs, Maya Din Reddy, who's running now a very, very large company. I invest in this company based in Philly. It's a company called Phenom in the HR tech space. And just a rocket ship company, profitable, while, all the other competitors have burnt and Scott incinerated hundreds of billions of dollars of cash here in the Valley. This guy's kind of, raised less money than the ARR that he's putting onto, on his top line every year right now. Just a phenomenal company. And the big thing that I respect about Mai is that he surrounded himself with He's always seeking out that next great idea from the next great person, right? So the job of the early stage entrepreneur is give him capital, doing all your work before you write the check, as much as you can. But things can still go wrong. And then surrounding the CEO with what I'd call experts or people that can really give them sort of additional ideas once you've identified what their soft spot might be. So one of my early stage CEOs happens to be this phenomenal founder from PayPal, technical guy. Had to learn go-to-market on the job, right? So I've inserted this guy whose company I've invested in that he worked at a very, very great company on the GTM side called Act Dynamics. And that person is now advising Suresh, who's the CEO in question, at this company I've done called Sadai, on GTM. So again, that's a great, sort of a fit. And he's learning a lot from them. And I think that brings down the risk of these founders going, off the trip.
I think that's very wise. I also think that it's sometimes uncomfortable for a first-time founder to ask for help.
Yeah.
And understanding that there's a mental block there for them to put them in that a little bit of a position of I'm sort of saying I don't know what I don't know and please, I want the advice. But I think there's an ego involved in that too, that a lot of people have a tough time asking for help. So if you're putting those people around them, it's just a very great environment that's going to allow that person to thrive.
The other thing, and you remind me of something, Scott, when you said that. The other thing I've kind of noticed is that these founders talk to other peers and get quote unquote advice and lock into that advice, which might be different, maybe by a few degrees, sometimes completely opposite to the way I would advise them on that particular point. So I've been thinking about that because, one of my CEOs does a lot of this where he'll go and talk to another CEO who's 28 and try to get advice on fundraising or timing of fundraising and so on and so forth. And I'm like, that guy, person, gal is not giving you the right advice, right? So the point here is not that don't talk to your peers, you should, but filter what you're getting based on the experience that somebody has, right? Because it's more likely, I'm not saying I'm always right, it's more likely that somebody that's gone down a path that has a perspective and does this professionally, he'll probably give you better advice than your buddy you're having a beer with, right? Yeah.
And sometimes I've actually found this a lot, and I think that it's also very damaging. So if somebody achieves some early success and they haven't been in the game long enough to understand that their early success is not the way that they achieve their early success is not the only way to achieve success, they become almost like there's like a religious conviction about how they achieve success, and that's the only way to do it, and that's the only advice they give, and they speak with such conviction and such charisma that the recipient of that advice starts to believe that that must be the only way to do it, or that must be the only way to operate through this specific, and they're only they're 25, 26, and they're giving this advice that served them well for the first 4 years of their life, but they don't realize that multiple things can be true at the same time, and that what worked in one industry or one instance, it doesn't always carry over, and there's this bias towards this, their short-lived experience. And I think that's also damaging. Yeah. And that you probably get that from peers.
The balancing comment is, right, this is not a age thing or an experience thing, right? Because I think that I met 22-year-old that are very, very insightful, and they have a different set of experiences. So I think the point I think we're both trying to make is, as a first-time founder, understand the source, put a filter on top of it, okay? Figure out, based on a lot of life is all about having a gut instincts, right? So when you've had enough reps, you just know, right? And so they need to get enough reps. And if you're taking feedback from founders, go talk to 10, not one. If you're trying to get feedback on a particular point from tenured VCs or whatever, talk to 5, not one, right? and then you balance it and you'll get the right, and then it'll apply our own intuition. So just kind of having one conversation over a cocktail doesn't make a strategy.
A quick shout out to the HubSpot Podcast Network for supporting Success Story. Now, if you like Success Story, you're going to love other podcasts in their network. One of my favorites is Create Like the Greats. It's hosted by Ross Simmons, obviously brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network. You're going to join Ross on Create Like the Greats. Ross dissects the genius behind history's most remarkable creators and their legendary work. So you're going to get this blend of history and business and creativity. He has a great voice, always good for a podcast, and he has a decade of practical experience. He's going to break down some of the best creative processes that built influential companies, brands, and stories in a way that anyone can apply. So whether or not you're fascinated by history, creative thinking, or you simply want to improve and systematize your own creativity without sacrificing productivity, this podcast is your perfect listen. Go listen to Create Like the Greats wherever you get your podcasts. A huge shout out to Lingoda for supporting today's episode. Now, if you're ready to master a new language, Lingoda is the online language platform trusted by over 100,000 students worldwide. Lingoda offers live classes with real teachers available 24/7. You can choose from German, English, business English, French, Spanish, or their newest edition, Italian. What sets Lingoda apart? The smallest class size in the market. It's just you and up to 5 other students. Or if you want, you can go one-on-one for personalized attention. Their native level teachers don't just teach language, they share culture too, and you'll speak confidently from day one. With Lingoda's flexible scheduling and proven curriculum, students report being able to navigate real conversations in weeks, not years. And if you're using Lingoda for business, their CEFR aligned courses ensure that you're learning internationally recognized language standards that employers value. Between sessions, you're going to reinforce your skills with downloadable materials and bite-sized practice exercises. And all Success Story listeners, they put together a special deal. Try Lingoda free with 3 group classes or 1 private class. Plus, you save on any course with my link try.lingoda.com/successstory and code SCOTT25. Don't miss this chance to transform your life through language learning.
You know, you mentioned six pillars, correct? That you work through to help the entrepreneur optimize their business. First-time founders, which pillar do they have the most trouble with? What's the biggest issue they have?
I think first-time founders have the biggest challenges with positioning. Like, how do you position the company? And they don't understand the importance of positioning on a relative basis, because positioning is needed not for TechCrunch or whatever, but it's needed to clearly deliver your 30-second pitch or 2-minute pitch when you're talking to a prospect, right? That's why positioning is a relative exercise. It's not a natural exercise, right? So we can chat about that maybe later. So I think that's one thing that they struggle with a lot. And the other obviously is the product, the GTM side, right? Because a typical archetype, Scott, for our founders is that they're technical, deeply technical, come from a deeply technical background, don't quite know GTM, and that's the muscle that they have to learn. The rest of the stuff is, I think, relatively easy, like finance and cap table and so on and so forth. But those two are the ones that they are the least sort of knowledgeable about and have to learn. And the next thing I'd say is, once they've been in seat for a while, the successful ones figure out how to build teams. The CEOs that sort of power through the learning curve and continue to grow are the ones that actually are have this amazing instinct to find the best position players in the market for what they're looking for before becoming necessary. So before you need that amazing VP of marketing, you've already been talking to and had dinners with a bunch of people that point you towards that. They're always 6 to 9 months ahead, right? And again, building the team, I guess, is the point. But putting in the work to build a great team is the ones that great entrepreneurs do. So I'd say those two, and then the team building being sort of the next one out of the 6.
You mentioned a nuance as to how we look at positioning.
Yeah.
Can you go deeper on that?
Yeah, so I think the positioning exercise is, and I'm a big fan, and I'm sure you've obviously read and heard Simon Sinek's, The Onions, right? The Three Circles. I think for me, what I try to educate, the discussion and the whiteboarding that I do with these founders is like, how do you relatively position your product or your offering? And what I mean by that is, in technology, everything moves in waves, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're innovating now in wave number 3, you have to have a narrative and a story that talks about wave 1 and wave 2, and this notion of why this, why now, right? That's a question you got to be able to answer, that why does this company deserve to exist now? And once you've answered that, and that answer to that is based in a trend that's going to happen, whether that company existed or not. You know what I mean? So for instance, I have a great company that is doing some incredible early stage work in e-commerce search that came out of MIT, and they've invented something called customer GPT. So it's basically a transformer that can detect customer behavior automatically without looking at log files and all that stuff, which is what every other technology company before that is based on. So there, why this, why now is this customer GPT, which is anchored in generative AI, which is happening now, right? So when that CEO talks to the market, says, hey, this could not have been done before 2022, because now is when this technology got built. So we're like part of that generation, right? But to be able to articulate that becomes important. And then the second thing is, okay, relative to what? Which is the question, the point I was making, which is like, okay, if indeed you're innovating on that technical curve, relative to which companies are you better and how? So that's a relative positioning that I think entrepreneurs sometimes struggle with. And we help them unpack that in a way that the narrative and the story and the 2-minute pitch to the chief digital officer of GSK, who I'm going to go see today, if they were sitting in the room, you got 2 minutes to tell her what your company does, and it just needs to be very crisp. So it needs to come out anchored in a tech trend, why this, why now. And the next thing you have to talk about is relative to the other options you have, why would this be better? And then the third is, hey, we can deliver this. So it's that narrative, which is super critical.
There's 2 thoughts on that. Actually, I'll go into the first idea quickly, but is it always required? I would say for Sierra, obviously it seems to be a requirement, but to have entrepreneurial success, to find true product market fit, to have some sort of hyperscale opportunity.
Yeah.
Is it always required to find some sort of tech trend or wave to piggyback off of? Or have you seen entrepreneurs that truly find novel ideas that have not been explored but are not sort of time bound?
I think that's a great question. I think there's plenty of examples where the innovation was not anchored in a tech breakthrough, but was anchored in a distribution breakthrough, right? For instance, I'll give you a great example. One of my first investments was a company called SourceFire, which was in the information security space. So this category called IPS, intrusion prevention system. So the notion that you put these devices on a network, and if there's any intrusion happening on the network, they're able to detect it and, audit, right? So yeah, we wrote the first check into this company, I think 5 pre-raising $3 million or something, and took us a decade, but took the company public, and Cisco Systems bought them for $2.7 billion. Now that company and Marty Roche, who was the founder, was not based on a technical innovation or a discontinuity in the market, right? Checkpoint was already in the market selling their product, and a whole bunch of other people. What Marty did, which was masterful, was that it was an open source company, and he built an open source based piece of software called Snort. And Snort just got insane adoption in the market, right? And because of the distribution, when we met him first, my partner Mark Fernandez and I went and met him, he was kind of building appliances for Honeywell and for all these enterprise companies out of his garage. And the reason was that they loved the open source product so much, and they were saying, hey, can you put this in an appliance and give us a SLA and we'll buy it. Here's 150K, here's 100K, Intel, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a great example of a distribution advantage that he was able to sort of ride the wave on. And that became one of the most successful companies. I still remember the board meeting right before we went public. There were only 3 deals, Scott, in that board meeting that were above 500K. Every other deal was like sub 100K, give or take, right? Which means that just the power of the distribution, right? And the fact that you had these 50K, 100K deals that are being bought all over the world is what, they exploited and became a great company.
Do you think that there is a playbook for understanding potential distribution that has not been discovered yet? Something that you would recommend other entrepreneurs look for that you saw with Marty?
Yeah. So I'm a big fan of open source, obviously. We made a ton of money using open source as a distribution channel and a source of competitive advantage. I have a very successful company based out of New York called Astronomer, which is building data pipelining software. So data orchestration, how do you connect a Snowflake, to some other, a system that you're trying to move data to, a Databricks or something else. And that's based on an open source product company called Airflow. So open source is very well understood, and that's something that is, certainly it's going to cut you to kind of, I think, pay dividends. In fact, Dave McJanet, who's the CEO of HashiCorp, which got sold to IBM recently, and I were at a football game. He's a good friend of mine, and he said in one of my interviews I did with him that, in his opinion, there will not be an infrastructure software company with consequence being built in the future that is not open source. So he's like that, black and white on that point, right? And there's some truth to that, because if you look at the cost of distribution as the companies get to 500 million ARR, you take 40% of 500 mil, right? That's a lot of money, right? And in terms of like what you're spending in sales and marketing. So if you can shave off like 15, 20 points on that, that just drops to the bottom line. So that's where distribution becomes important. But the other angles are, I think, consumer and enterprise are becoming, they're coming closer. More and more customers are discovering what an enterprise product does or doesn't do sort of themselves on top of the funnel. So a lot of the techniques that, we've used traditionally in consumer marketing, which is try before you buy, or paywalling, or information, you blast out information and people come through these social channels. Like LinkedIn happens to be a very effective channel for a lot of my startup companies. A lot of them actually use TikTok as well. We'll see what happens with that, which is, what's going on with the controversy there and the decision on the Supreme Court. But I think consumer coming closer with enterprise and the techniques that they use in consumer marketing are going to bleed into what I'd call traditional selling in the enterprise. And I think that's where there's lots of innovation to be unpacked.
Lots of opportunity. The second sort of thought or question I had about when things hit this massive growth, when a company has this massive growth curve and everything's working out, obviously that's every entrepreneur's dream. But I do know that that's also when a lot of things can break.
Yeah.
So when a company is scaling and you have product market fit, obviously this is great, but what should founders or entrepreneurs look for or pay attention to so it doesn't blow up in their face?
Yeah. That's a great question. And, I'm lucky enough to have been board members in these companies that have gone from like 50 to 150 in ARR. And that's exactly when the kind of that stress starts to shake the airplane, right? And you don't want to see the rivets flying off, right? Midair, right? So I think the most common issue that occurs is the two things that occur. One could be the cost of sales and distribution, right? So the point being that, let's assume for a second you have a very deep balance sheet. You've raised like $200-300 million. So you've got unlimited fuel. You can hire 30 sales guys, or you can hire 80 sales guys or gals. I think what traditionally happens is, or typically happens, and something that founders need to watch out for is, what is the cost of every incremental ARR dollar that you get back based on, what you're putting into sales and marketing. And there are lots and lots of metrics to measure this. There's magic numbers, and then there's, kind of the overall efficiency of the P&L, which is called the burn number, or burn ratio. So I think that's culprit number one, which is the inefficiency of the selling unit, whether that happens whether it's AEs or account exec sit, right? Like, what production are you getting per account exec? Because there's many, many ways to hide the inefficiency in that group, right? Because you could be losing reps, you're not training them well. I mean, there's all this bleeding that happens. So your top line is growing, but it's coming at a incremental expense. And the problem is, if you don't fix it when you're doing 50, it's going to be so expensive when you're doing 150 that it's just the company's going to just kind of keel over, or the growth rates are going to come down. So the efficiency of the sales and marketing engine at 50 million ARR is the most important thing to focus on, and something that trips up entrepreneurs the most. That's number one. And number two is like tech trends, like what's happened with ChatGPT and LLM, where a technological wave comes at you so fast, and you don't sort of pivot the company, right, fast enough. And I was hearing a podcast from one of my favorite CEOs, Mark Benioff, just on the Saturday. And Benioff talks about the fact where I think he was talking to Steve Jobs, and, Jobs sort of pivoted the whole company on the iPhone and the iPad, right? Like, he just went boom in one direction. And in that particular podcast, he calls it the Steve Jobs moment, right? Where you just like have so much conviction as a CEO, just you say, hey, we were going here, bang, we're just going to go there. And he himself talks about how he's done that at Salesforce with this agent force change in architecture. And what I didn't know when I heard the podcast is he actually made that call 2 weeks before Dreamforce. Okay, which is like crazy to me, right? 2 weeks before Dreamforce, he went in front of probably his marketing and PM and all the people. Hey, everything is Agentforce now. Okay, go rip up those PPTs, build them again. Like signage, all that stuff, right?
Wild.
And I'm sitting here going, okay,
but so much conviction, though, so much conviction,
and we're taking that hill. So I think that is culprit number two, which is what I'll call the slow boil and the frog in the slow boiling water, right? Where entrepreneurs just they know it's happening, but don't have the confidence and the cojones to say, hey, let's burn the bridges behind us. This is where we are going. And there's a lesson to be learned about that from Benioff and Albert Jobs.
Have you found in your life as an entrepreneur, as an investor, and some of the entrepreneurs you've invested in, there is a decision-making framework that works very well?
For which of these?
So no, for making such like a drastic, high conviction decision. I guess the question is like, what's the signal? Maybe it's just intuitive. Maybe it's an unfair question, but somebody's listening to this being like, shit, I don't know if I should be pivoting or not. Like, it just seems like overnight all my work could blow up if I make the wrong decision.
No, I think that's right. That's a great question. I think there's what my companies do is we first recognize this rapid shift at the board, just in a board meeting setting. And then we do an internal exercise, which is, can we do a little tiger team, like take 3 people in engineering and let's prove that the tech actually dramatically works to, because the customer is looking for the same outcome. They just want it better, right? Cheaper, faster. So there's an internal exercise that we do, and the other exercise is an external exercise where we'll go and talk to our top 10 customers and run this idea past them, all almost like they were as part of the company. And with those two signals, you have enough data, internal and external, to make the call. And the call might be, hey, let's wait for 6 months. But that work has to be done. And unfortunately, there's no framework like a MBA sort of framework that you were talking about, which can be applied to this, right? It just has to be this inside look, outside look, quick call. And the call could be go or wait, or we'll wait for 6 months and we'll readdress this. And you also need to look at what competition is doing, because competition is not just sitting around. And that's sort of the third axis that might have you move faster or sooner than you initially planned.
I think that's very, very smart, very wise. And I think that also, just a caveat, having these customer focus groups and speaking to your customers at any stage, even if it's not a major pivot decision, is probably one of the best practices you can do regardless.
Absolutely. I think any CEO that's not spending, close to 50% of the time in front of customers or at some customer-facing activity, once you've kind of got the meat and potatoes going in your company, which comes down to that third pillar I talked about, which is your team. So I call it, Scott, the no-pass team, the no-look-pass team, right? Like, and again, we're in playoff season, right? So, like these quarterbacks that, are looking here, but they throw there.
Yeah.
And the ball gets caught. So once you built the no-pass team, no-look-pass team, and you're confident that the lights are going to stay on and things are optimal back at the shop, your job as CEO is to be in front of the customers, because that's the best signal on where to take the company, where the competition is going, and obviously hitting your numbers.
Exactly.
I used to do that. Yeah.
I have no doubt. Yeah, no, I think that's such a missed opportunity for founders. One of my favorite stories, I have a friend, Aaron Spivak, and he sold a company, Hush Blankets, for I think $50 million to Sleep Country Canada. He's a Canadian. We're both Canadians, and he would jump on customer calls and ask them after they purchase, and just ask them, obviously not an enterprise B2B, a consumer product, but still same concept. He'd jump on calls and he'd ask them if they liked their purchase, what he could do better. And obviously he got massive feedback, and he'd be doing this up until the day when he actually sold. He'd jump on, say, 10 customer calls a week. And I thought it was a great idea. And he also noticed, outside of the fact that he built rapport, he got this great data from his customers as to what he was doing right and wrong. He also noticed that the lifetime value of the customer increased dramatically because they felt this personal connection with the CEO. So usually blankets are like a one-time purchase. He noticed after he jumped on a call with them, on a Zoom with them, they'd be buying blankets for all their friends and their family. So like the LTV of the customer. Yeah. So it's just small things, but it makes a huge difference. It really makes a huge difference. Last idea that I just want to sort of just touch on, because obviously this is something that a first-time founder will eventually have to think about, it would be the exit. So obviously you can private equity, you can go to strategic, you can IPO. Tell me just some wisdom or some insight around what the founder should be thinking about, when they should be thinking about it. Should they think about it when they raise their pre-seed? Should they think about it much later on? What do you recommend founders ideate around exit?
Yeah. I think the way to approach this question is to always remember that the best companies get bought and not sold. That's sort of the first point. And that is true for actually even going public, because the public investor is also buying, right? And they have an opportunity. If you're Putnam and you're trying to deploy $100 million in like tech, you have options, right? Should I put it in Palo Alto Networks, or should I put it in Zscaler, or like whatever, right? So you have to, the best companies are bought, they're not sold. That's point number one. Second is that sort of mass matters. So in other words, your outcome would be disproportionately higher if you're at a higher ARR, number of customers, number of blankets, whatever the case might be, right? So you have to kind of be heads down till you get to some mark. And in my opinion, and certainly the work that I do with B2B, that's maybe you become a serious company when you're like 25 to 30 in ARR. Before that, you're in quote unquote the valley of death, where a little sneeze from here and competitive move from there and bang, you're over, right? So everything else before that is an experiment. Now, given that framing, I think that as an entrepreneur, you're always looking at technology trends, right? Like, is the wave going to continue to kind of keep rising, the wave that I'm riding? Okay. What is competition doing? These are the little guys that are other startups relative to you. And what are the big guys doing, right? Constantly being 6-8 months ahead. What is Cisco doing? What's Datadog doing if you happen to be in that particular space? And then realizing that M&A and opportunities to sell, it's like, I give this example to my CEOs. It's like in the solar system, it's like celestial objects that are moving in different orbits. And what happens is, so you're here spinning away as a small company, and here's IBM on its, big swing. And if they get close to you, and my buddy Rob Thomas, who runs all the product and all GTM for IBM, gets interested in you, and he wants to pick you up for 300 mil or 400 mil, that is likely to be in a very, very short window of time, because when IBM swings past that apex, they have other priorities and other things. So you have a short window of time to hit that bid or hit that call. And that's what happened with me. So, when Octane got purchased for $3.2 billion, if I had not hit that window, and I was very lucky and got good advice, and obviously right place, right time, but the market crashed, right? 6 months after that. So if I had not hit that window, it would have been a very different story. Now, obviously it's not true for every single company. Some companies are running so well and so fast that they might have other options. But I think that's, again, in like single digit sort of probability. And ultimately, I think if the market is big enough, and I think you have a CEO that's got juice and performance is happening, like this company Phenom, I think then the world's your oyster. Because if you ask Mahi, he's on a mission to build a multi-billion-dollar company, and we're very supportive of that. And because he's producing the results, the competition is falling off, and the market is getting just even more interesting. So, but you also always have to have a constantly a sort of a aware mindset on what's happening around, and then craft your exit based on that.
What would be? I mean, we've gone through almost the full life cycle of an entrepreneur. What would be a question that I didn't ask you that I should have, or maybe some last words of wisdom or insight, or an idea that's even like floating around your head right now that you're dealing with?
I think the thing that I always am thinking of is, again, I do early stage work, and I'm obsessed with this. Personally, I just want to be associated with the best entrepreneur building the most world-beating company. So I'm like constant lookout for that, right? And my wife's like, what the hell are you reading at 11:30 at night? When I get the tap on my head under the blanket, and I wake up in the morning at 5:30 or whatever. I think I've been obsessed with this idea of the 100x multiple on first check, which is like, as an early stage investor, you write a check into an entrepreneur, and that check 100x's, right? Because the entrepreneur has produced like tremendous value and run. And that's a combination of the idea, the entrepreneur, and the very few companies that have been able to achieve that for a seed stage investor. So I'm just, it's not a direct answer to your question on like a new idea I'm thinking about, but I'm thinking about the framework, or what are the commonalities between those projects that hit that 100x mark, just also in a way for us at Sierra to be able to find more of those.
And that's what you found. Sorry, I was going to say, have you found commonalities?
We have. We're doing a lot of back testing. We have so much of data now, and also looking at external markets. I think one thing is this founder that sees the future before the rest of the world sees it. That just gives them an escape velocity before the rest of the market wakes up. And the other is really a trend that is not obvious today, but is going to be the big wave that's going to break. So this is like the Uber example. The 100x thing is something that my friend Mike Naples talks a lot about also at Floodgate. Now, he's also an early stage investor I respect a lot. But the prototypical, what's the archetype of that perfect founder and perfect idea to get you that 100x. Because I think if that happens, the company's going to be insanely successful. So we're trying to constantly evolve our playbook. And I think, Scott, that's what makes, my job as an early stage investor, working on behalf of my LPs that are kind enough to give us their confidence and money, super exciting because, there is no ceiling. Time I'm here, I'll be talking about the 150x, hopefully. It's like, you can do better. Come on. There's no, as I say, there's no A grade in venture capital.
Exactly. Listen, the space you play.
A minus.
No, I was going to say the space that you play in is so much fun. It's so much fun because you work with some of the best, most innovative people in the world. They have the best ideas, most innovative ideas. You see the future before it happens, which is incredible, absolutely incredible.
But just to correct that, Scott, we don't. The entrepreneurs do. And what our job is to look through the eyes of the entrepreneur and see the art of the possible. So the reason that, so we have these startup idea, entrepreneurs come and pitch us on this room right behind me. And we have this discussion and all my guys are like, this will go wrong. I'm like, okay, this is all great, but tell me what could go right? Right? That produces a massive company. Let's talk about that. That's the discussion of what happened. And then trying to figure out whether this entrepreneur, this team is the one that delivers that, right? And to me, that's the exciting. It's like you have to be glass half full, and obviously you manage risk at the fund level. You don't manage risk at the individual company level this early.
If you want to connect with some listeners, if they're interested about how to work with Sierra, who do you serve, and where should they reach you?
So if you're building, thoughtfully building a company in the B2B space globally. So I don't care whether you're in the US or, you're in Europe or where have you, because we invest all over the world. And you're looking for, thoughtful, stable partner and firm. And this is not just me. You get the entire Sierra family and the 80 CIOs that we have on our advisory board and the power of that. Then you should reach out to me. And the easiest way to get to me is just write me an email. I have an SLA of responding in 24 hours. So, and it's tim@sierraventures.com.
That's super easy. Okay. I love it. Last question I always like to finish up with. So this has obviously been a very business heavy podcast, which is incredible. But the last question, it ties back to a little bit more of it could be personal, professional growth and development, because the question is really simple. Out of all of your experience, your success, if you can take all the lessons, and they can be entrepreneurial or not, and you can only pass on one lesson to your kids, to your children, out of all the things you've learned, what would that lesson be?
Wake up early and make your bed. It's the only thing that matters over time, because perspiration always beats inspiration, and the best companies take time. And so I think people that have the juice to go at it day by day, because some days are great, some are not, right? And then give yourself the time to be successful. And the second is, do the dirty work. Make sure that you're learning the skills, calling on your customers, talking to investors. That's the make your bed part. But that's the easiest. That's a good start to your morning.